I see, didn't you?
Hi everyone, my name is Summer Plisco and I'm the playwright of this next piece. This piece was crafted by oral histories about Lincoln High School that was here in Gainesville. Each of these characters were based on several different oral histories, so they all represent a bunch of different people. These interviews were about Lincoln High School and why it was so important, what happened to Lincoln when we started integrating the schools here, and what it means to be a terrier. Enjoy.
Well, this is my diploma from when I was going to Lincoln. Oh, you know, I still got my yearbook. The Terriers. Ooh, I haven't heard that in a minute, the Terriers.
You know the Terriers are known for their fearlessness and tenacity.
Yeah, that's why we were called that. You know, I know.
Well, the people who went to Lincoln, we had to be fearless.
Now I know we were fearless on the field. Everybody wanted to play some football.
Oh, across the state, it was a very envied school. Everyone wanted to beat Lincoln.
Yeah.
It was always because they wanted to see our band. If the crowd was, let's say, in a big uproar, stuff like that, the minute Lincoln band hit the field, it got attention.
Oh, yes. Ooh, Lord. You know what? We'd always have a good routine at halftime. I mean, the game itself was meant a lot. And you had bragging rights for a full year if you win.
That's right.
But at halftime, oh, no, that meant a lot, let me tell you.
It was the whole show, from start to finish.
But you right. The Terriers were fearless and feared. You know, there was Howard in Ocala. They feared us. There was Union Academy in Palatka. They feared us. Mabane. Yeah, all those feared us, yeah. And then, you know what? And then when we went to Daytona and Palatka, we had to beat them twice. You had to beat them once on the field, and then you had to beat them trying to beat them off of the field, trying to get to your vehicle because they wanted to fight you.
Oh, that's right, but it was always like that for us. Not just when we played them other schools, but every single day. I remember when we walked to school, we had to pass the Buchholz bus from our neighborhood on the way to Lincoln. And when that Buchholz bus passed us, they spat on us while we was walking to school.
But then when we got to Lincoln, we were home.
That's right.
They taught us at Lincoln to do better than that.
Sure.
To do better than them.
You sure did. You know, and we were not taught at Lincoln like they say. We were educated.
That's right.
You see, when you're taught, it's between the covers of the book. But when you're educated, it's between the covers of the book and outside of the book, too.
That's right.
It's because the teachers, well, they really cared. See, when I started teaching at Lincoln, I wanted to try to change things in the teaching situation. The textbook that we had to teach from was a textbook students at Gainesville High had used. When they get new books, we would get the old books handed down to us to teach from.
We always had them hand-me-down books. People sometimes strategically tore out the pages.
They sure did.
Sometimes the books was written in.
And sometimes it had messages in those books that were directed at you, directed at us. Now, one time, I had a book, and I saw, "To the nigger that gets this book, I hope you have the intelligence to comprehend what's in this book."
Because they knew that those books were going to be passed down to us.
See?
And I had to teach government and history of this country from those books. But the thing is, what I was supposed to be teaching from these textbooks was not reality. Not the reality that was really happening.
No?
You know, they didn't even mention people like Frederick Douglass.
No. Yeah, they didn't even mention blacks. The black people that mattered, that changed history. You know what? We had to talk about those presidents like Jefferson, and you had to talk about Andrew Jackson, Abe Lincoln, and George Washington. But we didn't talk about George Washington Carver.
Nope.
Nor Booker T. Washington.
No.
None of that was in the history book because the history book wasn't written to teach about people like that. So I wrote a new lesson plan and I gave it to the white supervisor on social studies to approve. when the civil rights movement came about, I was teaching about pressure groups at the time. So I was teaching my students about pressure groups, textbook left out, the SNCC, the CORE, the NAACP. One day while I was teaching my students this, the supervisor of the school came into my classroom. And you know what she did? She went back and told the superintendent that I was teaching subversive activity.
You were just teaching the facts?
I said that. I said, don't tell me how to teach. I said, I'm teaching the facts. And I told the administrator point blank, no one in this room has more knowledge about history of government than I did. Oh, I thought I was going to be fired right then and there. But instead of getting rid of me, they moved me out of the classroom and moved me to the front offices.
He became the dean just so that he wouldn't be directly involved with teaching the students. But you see, that's how much our teachers cared.
You know what? The teaching never stopped. Educating never stopped. Every day there was something to remind you that one day you had to be better than the next guy because of how you looked or who you were.
And that we were bright. We weren't dumb.
No.
Well, that too was a stereotype that we had to fight back then because we always was compared to white kids. Back in the day, in 1960s, if you were white, you were supposedly smart. If you were black, you wasn't supposed to be smart. And that was always so crazy to me.
Me too. You know, when Lincoln closed and we went to different white high schools, I went to Gainesville High School, and we actually were ahead of those students. We were ahead of those students.
You know what? We find all these years it's been drilled that the white kids were supposed to be much smarter than us. And when we get over to the white schools, we find out that we had been bamboozled.
It's really a credit to the teachers of how they cared, how good they were.
What they were telling us was that you are somebody. Yeah.
See, the one thing about when I went to Lincoln, it wasn't integrated.
It was a segregated school.
Yeah, and you would think that that's not a good thing, but believe me, it was. And I don't mean to come across that I'm against integration.
It's just that Lincoln was a hub for the black community. Everything took place virtually at Lincoln.
The pride was there. It was where things happened.
So when you start talking about the things that occurred after integration, we began to lose our identity. We began to lose a lot of the identity that got us to this point.
You know, I said that one time, and this girl goes to me. She says, a little white girl, wait, you don't like integration?
No.
She did not get that integration was not what blacks asked for. We asked for separate, but equal.
For 10 years, just give us separate but equal. Just give Lincoln the same books and whatnot you give the other schools.
There was always separate, but there was never an equal.
You know what? I think about during my time in high school, I never attended school for 9 months. Now, white kids, they attended school for 9 months. I attended school for 8 months because I was expected to be available to work the farms at the harvest, which I refused to do.
And then, of course, the closing of Lincoln came, 1969 or 1970, right around there.
Yes. Oh, there were big protests over closing Lincoln. It was a bitter closing. Students decided that they would just knock down lockers, raid the campus, and destroy it because, that was just another one of those unequal things for blacks. Our school had to be closed.
Lincoln High was top of the line as far as high schools considered in Florida,
But integration came and changed that.
we had to close a beautiful community. That closeness that we had created, it was gone.
I felt like we lost something.
Identity.
The value of history.
So many things like personal respect for each other, family.
Oh, we just lost so much of our time. And now I realize that time doesn't stand still. You know, you've got to progress to move forward. But we lost the very core, the fiber of those things that made us strong and when we began to integrate schools.
Even though we had teachers that was integrated.
Oh, yeah, with the white teachers, we got along fine. We never saw any color.
No. We had the utmost respect for our teachers, and we were close.
And Lincoln was a school where the teachers were close with your parents, too.
Yes. Now, if we did anything wrong, word got around. Even the neighbors had the right to chastise us and then told our parents. And there was another beating when we got home.
But when we came up, we had what you call respect for your elders because of that. That's why I was so thankful for Lincoln High School, and I still am.
That love for Lincoln will always be there.
Well, still there's number one. Sorry. Well, it's still for one reason. One, because the genuine loyalty that we have fostered amongst the students.
Number two, Lincoln was like a second home.
Number three, a number of kids would rather be at Lincoln because the conditions and atmosphere at Lincoln were probably better than the conditions at home.
Number four, it was instilled in us that education was a way to a better life. You were always told to get your education to graduate from high school.
Ooh, graduation was the icing on the cake, but they did so much leading up to graduation. You remember you had your class night where you were presented with your class ring, and then we would do the class play.
And you had the Terrier bark. That was the talent show.
And then after graduation, you would go on a class trip.
Oh, your homecoming was a highlight of the year for me. Woo! When we had to make the floats with those paper napkins, remember that?
Yes, and homecoming was the highlight for everyone in the black community.
Oh, yes. You know, it was standing room only at Citizens Field. Ooh.
All the Terriers would come back.
Oh, yeah.
We still have the desire to bring Lincoln back.
It's a school that needs to come back into existence, if you ask me. It just needs to.
Yeah.
And when I say that because of some of the problems that we're facing today in this society, especially in the African Americans.
If the environment of Lincoln could be recreated, it would help us tremendously. It would help this city tremendously, this country.
You know what? I look back on Lincoln High School, and sometimes now, I shed a little tear because I just love being at Lincoln High. And I'm a Terrier. I'll never forget the spirit of the Terrier.
Hi, as we move into Act 2, I'm just going to remind you that if you're not with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Center or if you're not with the Harn, we ask you to refrain from taking pictures. We don't have contractual rights to allow pictures to be taken in the galleries except under specific conditions. So thanks very much. Appreciate that.